they see a guy like Tom, and they go, gosh, what if I were that driven when I was his age? Where would I be now? That's not healthy thinking. And that's the thing that, when I listened to her she gave me like a 4-minute recap. And I'm like, I'm sure the recap could have been longer than that. Remember, if you, for some reason, didn't get the replay, which would have been sent out on Wednesday, the copy of the link so that you could replay the call, I'm going to put, again, my assistant's email in here in the chat. And remember, you can always email Gina and say, I need the recording and I need my email on the permanent email list where the recordings go out. It's all hands off now. It's done by an outside company. So we make sure, and it's done with MailChimp, so it's not spam. Anyway, so for the most part, it shouldn't be ending up in your spam box. But wow, I just also want to welcome the Oklahoma group. That's the Oklahoma group seems to be jumping on today. So Vanessa and Cheryl, good to see you guys. Thanks for being on. So anyway, Vanessa, were you or Cheryl, anybody on the call last week when Casey was the guest speaker and I wasn't around?
I was. That was phenomenal.
Yeah. So
yeah. Motivating, inspiring.
Right. And that's what I was just talking about, is that Tom isn't somebody we knew. He reached out to me because we're at the same company and said, hey, I heard about your wife. I'd like to coach with her. A lot of people now that used to call me and say, hey, we're having an event, we'd like you to speak at it, are calling me and going, hey, are you and your wife coming to that event? I go, yeah, we are. And they go, great. Do you think your wife would speak at it? I love it. So I don't mind the break from speaking, because everywhere we go, they're like, can your wife speak? Not you. Could you just be quiet? Let her talk. So it's been really good, and it's refreshing because she brings a different, like, we are completely different in our styles, right? She's a high D and she delivers like a high D when she's speaking. But so I want to go back to what I was saying about Tom. We can get caught up in saying, wow, Tom's 27. You could say, I'm 54, I'm twice his age, and I don't have that drive. Or the idea is learn a lesson and use it. And it doesn't matter how old they are. I got taught a lesson when I think I was in my late 30s, and I hired this lady. I was managing someone else's real estate office. And this one lady was one of the agents in the office. There was only 12 agents in the office. And she said something about how old she was. And I said, oh my gosh, I can remember. She said she was 63. I can remember. She said, I'm 63. I said, you look amazing for 63 years old. And she said, Rick, I'm going to teach you a little lesson since you are now a boss. People either look amazing or they don't. They don't look amazing for an age, right? Or for anything, right? She said, don't qualify your compliment. So I learned that lesson that, wow, he's super driven for a 27-year-old, or wow, based on, I'm 63. Well, based on where you are in your life at 63, you don't have a lot to show for all your hard work, do you? Boom. So this is an issue, because our self-talk is the biggest problem we deal with on a daily basis. And the problem is we don't even notice it's doing that to us. So obviously I was excited to have this, $1.4 million listing appointment at 8:30 in the morning. But I also had this commitment to this call, and it was so cool that she wasn't, I said, oh my gosh, it was late Thursday night, very late, that I got the notice that the, 10:30 listing appointment had been moved to 8:30, and that was all she could do, because she's a frontline worker. She's an emergency room nurse. And I said, I'll make it work, right? So I go, what are you doing tomorrow at 9 a.m.? And she goes, I actually just had my call cancel. And I said, great, you take over my call. And I said, Tom was going to come on, and she knew Tom. She's the one who told me Tom's story, so I'd already asked him to be the guest speaker. But the reason I say that was when I was listening to her tell me about her story when he first hired her as a coach, I thought to myself, wow, imagine where I'd be today. I mean, I did and said what I'm telling you not to do. but it's almost automatic to have a self-talk that is not effective for pushing you forward. You're not going to go back to 27 years old if you're like me, almost 64. You're not. So what can I do with the information I got from him now? Well, I'll tell you, you don't know the story about how broke I was in, back in 2009, 10, and 11. And that I decided I just had to get back to work, right? I had to get really focused on working and selling houses and talking to people, but that I sell real estate still, and I never will stop selling real estate. Please list with me, please sell with me. And I think about what he's doing, and what was he doing? When he was living, the family, the three members of the family were living on a veteran's pension. And I thought about that, and I thought, wow, how could we be more frugal? How can I, do I really need 44 multicolored shirts? Right? Those are the kinds of things I started thinking about, as opposed to the main thing, that when we are saying something that's a negative talk, it all falls under one category. And I want you, if you have never heard this, you probably have from me or from someone else, but it's one overriding category or context. Okay. So your negative thinking is the content, and the overriding context of most negative thinking is this one sentence: I am not enough. So write that down, and then scratch it out, and then crumple up the paper, light fire to it, and burn it. The reason I say that is you don't want the negative thoughts around, but you do have to understand, once people say it's the same thing as having a disease, all right, having an addiction, all right? So some of us don't have a chemical or a substance addiction, but we have an addiction to not being enough. Okay, you know what our other addictions are as human beings? We have addictions to being right, right? Lots of human beings want to be right, but what most human beings want to be right about, you'll never believe it. Here's another one for the ages. I want to be right about the fact that I suck. Right? You want to be like people, you don't do anything, human beings do nothing unless there's a reward attached. So when you self-sabotage, or that to create business, you should go do this and this and this, and you don't go do this and this, that's so you can be right about I suck. I'm a loser. Okay. I heard a lady on a call today talking about her woes. Okay. Now I know this lady, and her woes were that she doesn't have a husband or a significant other with an income. She doesn't have another source of income. So it's all on her. And when she got an illness recently, not COVID, I don't want to talk about what it was, but that she ended up in a hospital for a little while, that, she only had herself to depend on. And I've known this person for a long time, and I wasn't impressed with the story of woe, because this person is a coach. And even though she's a very productive real estate agent, it was a lie. She did have another source of income. She has coaching income, not just real estate income. And those are things that she chooses to do. But all I heard in there at the end, it was a very, great ending, because she said, oh, if it wasn't for this coaching company and all of these great things. But what I was hearing in the story is writing a story about I am not enough because I don't have a second income. I don't have someone else to support me in those times when I'm not selling enough houses. Well, even when you do, why do you want that? Don't you want to be independent? Don't you want to do enough for yourself? Don't you want to create something that's your own? And if you do or don't, it's not good or bad. It's just is. Okay. I have a lot of personal friends who are completely supported and completely fine with it by their lifestyle. Completely fine. I love it. They're good with it. They love their life. They love that someone else is bringing in the money, but they're doing all of these other things. It's all good. It's what works for you, as long as it's moving you towards where you want to end up. But I want you to remember those two. The big context is I am not enough. When you get to be right about sucking, when you get to be right about, see, there's more proof that my life sucks. That's the crap. I mean, and some of the most successful people still fight with that every single morning. Every single morning. So having been raised, I was raised in an Orthodox family, which is very similar to Catholic, but the Orthodox priests have much bigger beards and their crosses are much bigger. Other than that, they're pretty much the same. So in my Orthodox family, I would see my mom do this a lot, right? So she'd get up in the morning, she'd, wish us all good morning, and then you'd see her in the kitchen do one of those, right? If you're not of that persuasion, you don't know what it is, we can talk about it another time. But so I picked up that habit. And when I was a little older and understood it, I asked my mom, I go, why do you do that? She goes, it's my way of checking in with God. It's my way of saying thank you for another day, all those things. And I picked it up, I go, oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. It's almost like a quick prayer, a gratitude for, hey, I'm alive. It's another day. So I find myself doing that once in a while, still here at, almost 64 years old. And the reason I bring that up is that is one of the reminders. Remember what I said? I've said this over and over again, that I want to surround myself with people in life that are hungry, humble, smart, and coachable. Hungry, humble, smart, and coachable. Look around at the people that, because I'll tell you what, people that are hungry, humble, smart, and coachable are not holding on to your ankles. And let me tell you what I mean by that. People that are holding on to your ankles, and they're not physically actually holding on, but it's a virtual or a feeling, is that if they're holding on to your ankles, they want you to succeed, but make sure you take them with them. And don't go too high without me. Don't elevate yourself too much without me. And I can remember back to a part of my life where it was during one of the most booming periods of my real estate career. It was between 1999 and 2006. And I had an assistant, I had a transaction coordinator, we had seven buyer's agents and a business partner, and this one assistant who played more than the role of assistant. She kind of oversaw a lot of things, and she was licensed, and she also did buyers and brought listings to the table. But her main job was operations manager. But when I left that relationship and I moved on in my life, I could look back and say, I felt like that person had their arms securely wrapped around my ankles. Vanessa, if you don't mind me asking, I was talking so fast and then I saw you say, that's what I say. What is that I missed that I said that you also say? You're on mute, Vanessa, if you're talking.
Oh, I said that I say hungry. I want hungry, humble, smart, and coachable people around me too. I don't know if I picked that up from you, but I've been saying it, and I have it in my my daily thing where I look at it every day, and I looked up, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by those people.
It's awesome. And you know what you need to do to be surrounded by those people is be
that
humble, smart.
Be that person.
Yeah. And so obviously, I've said this before on this call that I struggle. I'm 41 years in the business. Sometimes I feel like I'm not struggling to be hungry. Believe me, I am hungry all the time. I want more. But what I found myself struggling with was being humble and coachable. All right. Now, I don't, I take criticism pretty well. I don't meet a lot of people when I say, could you give me a little feedback on me, that they say, oh, you're arrogant. I haven't heard that a lot in my life. I've heard it a couple of times, but it's not something I would ever intend to be. And sometimes confidence can be mistaken. So there's a couple of lessons that I really want to spread today as a result of what I heard about Casey's call last week. But one of them is, how do you react when you get unsolicited negative feedback about yourself? And the reason I say that is, you gave yourself, a majority of people that would have listened to Tom Turns tell his story last week would have given themselves some negative feedback about where they are in their life. Ooh, we got more Oklahoma people signing in, Vanessa. I don't know. Did you yell at everyone or what? Or are you just hoping to hear Casey again? I'm kidding. All right.
We got a reminder. We got a reminder. That's why we're on.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank
Well,
you.
By the way, Casey's going to be on next Friday. I don't know if anybody noticed that in my email, but she will be running the call next Friday, the 23rd. So, and I won't be anywhere around to affect what she says or if she talks about me or whatever. So anyway, so the reason I say that is, in fact, I believe what I said about the feedback is that sometimes you get unsolicited feedback about yourself that is not what you expected to hear. I don't want to say it's negative or positive. Remember, I can remember at a period of time getting a lot of feedback in my life where people would come up to me when I was in this very, very long coaching program, and they'd say, "Would you like some feedback?" And I kept saying, "Yeah." And then they go, "Well, this is what I'm seeing about you, and this is what I'm seeing about you." And I would get all deflated. So I went to my coach and I said, "What happens when that he would, when I get all this feedback?" And he goes, "Well, first, let me ask you something. Are you getting unsolicited feedback, or are most of these people asking you first, would you be open to some feedback?" And I said, "Well, honestly, most of them are asking me first, Rick, would you be open to some feedback about how you're showing up?" And because it was all these people in the same coaching program, so they were encouraged to do that. And so the coach looks at me and he says, "And you say yes every time?" I said, "Pretty much." And he goes, "Why don't you ever say no?" I said, "Oh my God, could I say no?" And he goes, "Yes." He said, "They're asking your permission to give you feedback. If it's one of those days where you don't feel like hearing anybody's freaking feedback, say no. I'm not open to feedback. Keep it to your damn self." Right? But here's the other thing. He said, "When someone gives you feedback, do you automatically assume it's the truth?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, that's an issue, Rick." He said, "Other people can have other opinions about yourself. If it triggers you, it might be because you have that same opinion of yourself." He said, "But go look in the mirror and say the words again. Say those feedback to yourself and say, are these things true for me? Do I feel like I'm arrogant? Do I feel like I'm whatever I was being called, or a taker?" I remember being called a taker, not a giver. And these are all triggers for me because I've always felt myself to be a giver, not a taker. And you get the whole idea. So think about this. Could you go to the mirror and say to yourself, are those things true for me? Do I feel like that about myself? It's only you, you and yourself in front of the mirror and whatever higher power you may or may not believe in. So that's the whole thing, is that we get to translate, we get to self-talk, but what if we just changed it all? What if our context stopped being "I'm not enough"? Remember, the context is the overlying thing under which our thinking and our reactions are all under. Okay, so all of those thinking and reactions are content, and the context is what it comes under. If the context is "I am not enough," believe me, in all the coaching and and um, coaching sessions, therapy, not really so much therapy, but couples, what do they call it? Counseling, couples counseling, and all of this stuff that my wife and I have done, and all the personal development work I've done, it came up a lot that I have an issue with not being enough. That when someone gives me any criticism, I am automatically go, I guess I'm not enough. I guess I got to even be better than I am. Right? As opposed to just taking a really honest look and saying, is this an area that I could work on? And would it help me get closer to what I want in life for me? Right? And the majority of my learning in these areas has been in the last fifth of my life so far, the last 10 or 12 years. So out of 64 years, that's about 1/5. So I've done about 80% of my emotional and mental growing and personal development growing in the last 12 years of my life. Now, guess what else? If you're a person whose context is typically "I am not enough," guess what a person like me would say? They go, "Well, what if you knew this when you were younger? What if I knew all this when I was 25 or 30 instead of, in my 50s? Well, then you go back to "I'm not enough" again. You go back to what ifs instead of what could be. You're going, what if I knew way back then? Well, you didn't know back then. So you know what I realized? I go, oh my gosh, I know now, so I can tell my kids. I know now, so I can tell others. So I can make a bigger difference that way with all the money. I always tell people, I go, all the money I spent, you better listen to me, because I spent a ton of money and you're getting it for free. Right? So it's really, really a chance to observe. And I know, it was like, which of you can remember, and please speak up, just take over. when Hemi was skiing downhill with his dad, Charlie, skiing behind him. Tell me a little bit about what you experienced in that video.
Keep looking where you want to go.
Keep looking where you want to go. Who said that? Heidi?
Patrice.
It's you, Patrice. Okay, thank you. Vanessa, did you say something? Because you were on mute. I didn't hear if you said something.
I said, keep looking where you want to go, but I was on mute, so I knew.
All right. But remember how Charlie, like to me, it was, you know, those quadruplets that Hemi is one of are so near and dear to me. But remember what Charlie said that, and Casey probably highlighted it. What did Charlie say when Hemi fell and stopped, right? Those were such leadership quality words, you know, that he gave him, right? He didn't say, oh, are you okay? He said, look how far you've come. Look how fast you went. Like all of these, right, positive words. But what I want to know for you is not that you didn't get a lesson about it, but how many of you went to negativity? How many of you went to, I wasn't that kind of parent? I don't think like that. I don't need you to answer, but that's the problem, is taking the lesson, not applying it and saying, I suck because I didn't know this, but instantly being excited about it and saying, how will this improve my life going forward? And I know when I saw that, I immediately, because both my boys, they didn't ski or anything, but they played baseball from very early ages, and they're in their 30s and they still play baseball. But I remember thinking immediately when I saw that, wow, was I that kind of dad when I was younger? And it doesn't matter. I can be that kind of dad now, right? That's what I'm asking to get out of you is, did you allow yourself to go into someplace negative? Or did you allow yourself to say, I can learn from this and create a difference in my life going forward? By the way, no matter what you did, it's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It was a lesson. That's all. It was a lesson. And can I use the lesson? Can I step up as a leader and change the outcome as a result of what I'm seeing other people do? And that's the whole idea by starting your day every day, hungry, humble, smart, and coachable. Being open to what could be today. What could be today? What? I don't know what could be, but I'm open for a miracle. I'm open to learn a lesson. I'm open to be humbled. I'm open to be coached. All right. Now, one of the things that in a couple weeks, Casey and I will celebrate 13 years since our first date, and we've been married 6.5. So we had, what is that? 6.5 other years where we weren't married. And those were a very tumultuous 6.5 years where we were living together, we weren't living together. We were a couple, we weren't a couple. And we went through some real pain. Now remember this, I'm going to remind you this. I've said it before. Struggling is a part of life. Suffering is optional. Okay? Struggling is a part of life. Suffering is optional. And what do I mean by that? You're going to decide if you're suffering or learning and growing all along the way. I was suffering. Poor you. Shut up. Right? Were you struggling? Yes, we all struggle. It's part of life. But you got to decide, do I need to suffer as a part of that struggling? No. That's a mindset. Suffering is a mindset. All right? Struggling is a fact of life. Strugglings are life lessons. But we went through some, man, hated each other. Like, just it was not good. She didn't like my baggage. I didn't like her baggage. We're both second marriage. We both had, issues. And yet both of us must have, I mean, it's not like we knew it necessarily in the moment, must have had some inkling that this could be amazing if we worked out the issues and finally got to the depth of what we felt for each other and not allow the outside influence to make a difference in our relationship. It took years. One point, 1.5 years of twice monthly meetings with a counselor. one year, $40,000 I spent on a personal coach that was a life and a business coach, like all kinds of great, great things that ended up changing my life. So you could say, wow, that really came late in life. That's just in the last few years. Right. But everything happens at the perfect moment. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I used to hear my dad say that all the time, like much, much younger in my life, but I never really got it like I get it now. And so when you watch a video like that, when you hear a guy like Tom Turns at 27 years old, and you watch a video of Hemi and his dad, who became a dad really much later in life, because Charlie's in his late 40s and has 4 3-year-olds and 1 6-year-old, you start thinking about, oh, there's something else I learned. There's something else I learned. But learning something from those means you had to be at least coachable and humble enough to realize that somebody had something they could teach you. My dad used to always tell us to respect our elders. And one day he sat down to explain that to us. And he said, your elders are anybody that's lived one more day on this earth than you, that because no matter of their status in life, they have one more day's life experience than you do, period. Right? So we were raised to call everybody Mr. and Mrs. We were very respectful. We couldn't say the word shut up. We couldn't say the word liar. We couldn't say the word chick for a girl. Like there was all kinds of rules, right? Very, very, my dad was a gentleman's gentleman and never swore. It was just amazing, right? So, he'd been an Army sergeant. I don't know many Army sergeants who don't swear, but I asked some of my dad's past people when he was alive about, did dad swear in the Army? They go, no, only guy that didn't, stuff like that. So there's always going to be these lessons. So think about this as you remember the call from last week. I'm sure Casey will have something even just as amazing or more amazing for you next week when she's on the call. But please remember this, we have an opportunity to wake up every morning looking for miracles or expecting them to be delivered. I want to look for them, right? I want to go through the muck. Did you hear, you heard about the story of Jimmy and Johnny? They were twins. And if you heard the story, I'd love to hear afterwards. Jimmy and Johnny were twins. One was born a pessimist, one was born an optimist. And every year at Christmas, the parents, struggled. They'd be like, what do we do? How do we get Johnny to be more optimistic and Jimmy to be a little bit more realistic? Their son Jimmy was a super optimist, right? So they went to a psychologist. I saw the psychologist said, look, get Johnny a big old pile of toys for Christmas and put him in his room and open the door and surprise him. And then for Jimmy, get him a big pile of manure and put it in his room. Has anybody heard this story, by the way? You can unmute if you have. Right? So they wake up Christmas morning, they surprise them, they open the door and they leave the boys in their rooms and they shut the door. So an hour later, the parents go back in the room and, Johnny's in his room and he's torn open all the toys and unwrapped all the wrapping. And he's sitting there like this. And they go, what's wrong, Johnny? And he goes, yeah, I got a bunch of toys, but I'll bet Jimmy got something better. Right? That was their pessimist. Well, they go into Jimmy's room, the optimist, and all that you can see in the pile of manure is Jimmy's feet. And he's way down deep inside of it. And they go, Jimmy, what are you doing? He goes, you can't fool me. If there's a pile of manure, there must be a pony somewhere. So like I learned that, I heard that on an album by a psychologist in 1968. Okay. It was a big old long play album, an LP, and it was a psychologist named Dr. Murray Banks. And I used to listen to him over and over again because there were these, I didn't even realize, I think that might've been the beginning of my desire to be motivational or to be motivated. And it was great. So every time I hear that, I go, are we going to be Jimmy or are we going to be Johnny? Right. And are we going to take the lesson and go, oh my God, look at all the good things I can do with this new lesson? Or are we going to go, well, there you go. I must have sucked my whole life. So I think, I think there's some things to look at. I would definitely encourage you all and to tell your friends and your family members, last week's call is not a call just for real estate agents. Gather your family around and let them hear Tom, let them see Hemi, let them hear Charlie, the dad, talk to Hemi and Casey's leadership choices and picks out of what she showed you. I definitely think that I'm going to be spreading that video out on YouTube and letting a lot of people use it also. So that's my point for you guys today. I thought about the call this morning and I said, sometimes I feel like the call has to go a certain amount. And then I realized that sometimes I have a really passionate message that I want to deliver. But I do want to wrap up and allow you guys to go off early today and say this, that when you have big, huge, hairy, audacious goals, and whenever I say that, I think of Carla England, because Carla has probably attended more of my business planning clinics than anyone I know. And I always say that, right? And my wife and I actually have a very respectable disagreement about the idea of BHAG's big, hairy, audacious goals, as opposed to just, my wife calls them, excuse my language, no shit, no kidding goals, right? It's not no big, hairy, audacious goal. It's like, no shit, no kidding, I'm going to get to this point, right? So that's hers, that's mine. But the reason I say that is when you have huge goals, look, there's no such thing as not balanced. Life is always going to be balanced. So if you have big, huge, hairy, audacious goals, you're going to have big, huge challenges put in front of you to reach those, so that God and the universe know you're worthy of the goal once you get there. So if you're bumping up against stuff all the time, good for you. Thanks for setting a goal hairy enough that you have stuff you have to bump up against. Because for you to reach that goal, you're going to need to have had those lessons that got you to that point in the first place. All right. And so why is the overarching context of today's call, I am not enough, is because all thinking that takes us away from that positive direction that we all want to go into are things that fall in content under I am not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm too scared to do those calls. Those calls are boring. Somebody's going to hate me when I make those calls. Whatever those hangups are. And guess what? If you don't see the relationship between this and you selling more homes, then you've missed the point completely. Because anything that's keeping you from your success is falling under the hierarchy of I am not enough. When you are, you've got everything. You just need to use it. All right. So pay attention to your self-talk. Remind yourself every morning to be hungry, humble, smart, and coachable. And if you're one of the people that does one of these, just do it more often. All right. Have a great week. Casey, we'll see you next Friday on the 23rd. I'll be back here on the 30th to see you guys.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.